Hey, it's Greg. This is the Square Pizza Pod, cooked up by Shermco. LI Institute here in Charlotte, and we just had her on the podcast last hour, and we had a local parent come who's attending the Institute, talking about that conference. I think it's the first ever PLI Institute in North Carolina. So we're really excited about it. Yeah. Awesome. And just a double benefit getting to talk to you right now, right after this as well. So Lakisha, thanks again. Welcome to the Square Pizza Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. Got to take a walk earlier this morning, which is not something that I'm always able to do. So it's good to be out in nature. Bay Area has great weather, but also we just have great landscape.
Yeah. So is that you like starting your day when possible, walking, getting out in nature?
I like a good hike whenever I can make it happen. You know, it also helps. It helps with good mental acuity. It helps sleep better. Right. You know, when you do it. So whenever I can fit it in, I try to fit it in, and I'm a happier person. And it's like self-care, right? So you feel like I'm giving time to myself before I give it to everybody else. So many benefits.
I like that. I'm with it. I try to walk too. Actually, I just found out we work in like a co-working spot, and there's a coffee shop out front. And I just found out the coffee shop team gave me a nickname called the Walker because they see that I walk so much in and out of the office and around like this little complex right here, which I'm fine with. People have called me way worse and will call me way worse. But yeah, I'm down with walking. You got a certain goal, like step goal each day, or you just do what you can?
I try to do like an hour, but I think it does turn out to be about like, you know, around the 10,000 steps. And I think the good thing about it is like it gives you a major boost. And then if you're moving around throughout the day, and, you know, I just have a cell phone that kind of tracks it if it's on me, then by the end of the evening, you've got like those big boosts of steps on top of just like the movement of the day. So, but yeah, and I'm always listening to a podcast or two and just kind of in my own zone. And it really helps.
I know Square Pizza is probably your favorite all-time podcast, but I'm curious what other podcasts you listen to. If you want to give somebody a shout out.
Yeah, I mean, I listen to like Lewis Howes, School of Greatness, Huberman Lab. I listen to, what's another one that I've really gotten into? Oh, I do listen to like On Purpose by Jay Shetty. I haven't been listening to that as much. And then I'm sort of fishing around for some new ones. I do love like anything that Tony Robbins is on. So sometimes I'll just like search his name in an Apple podcast and he'll be like on different folks' podcasts. Even though I have his podcast downloaded, he doesn't do a lot of like podcasts on the Tony Robbins podcast. So so just stuff to stay positive, expand the mind, the brain, all that good stuff.
You familiar with Eric Thomas, motivational speaker?
I have not heard of him.
Out of Detroit.
Does he have a podcast?
Yeah, you might recognize him once you see him. Maybe not. But he's in that same genre as Tony Robbins, if you will, but has a pretty incredible backstory. And is I have all of his books and listen to all his podcasts and everything else. But it's also a good segue, actually. Oh, go ahead.
The Secret to Success, the Residence Network.
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
Eric Thomas and Associates, I think, is like his official thing. He went viral. He used to do like a Monday motivational video on YouTube every Monday. Then he went viral with one video called when you let me get this right before I butcher it. When you want to succeed as bad as you want to breathe, that's when you'll be successful. And that was like the video that made him go viral, and then his career kind of took off from there. But if you like Tony Robbins, you like him.
Okay, yeah. I'm gonna check him out. Thank you for that.
Of course. And it's a good segue because I and my team are pretty frequent listeners to the 8 Black Hands podcast for a number of reasons. But you got a pretty great shout out from 2 of the 8 Black Hands, one Chris Stewart, about your work. And if I could, would love to kind of read this quote and see how you respond to it.
Sure.
So yeah, Chris said Lakisha moves differently. Part of that is that she thinks about concrete actions, not just activism by itself, but real living programs that the community needs, a lot like the Black Panthers. So a pretty powerful statement at the end of one of the recent podcast episodes. We certainly
cool.
respect Chris and Mr. Stewart and Sharif and Ray and Charles and all the guys on the podcast. I'm just curious, like, how you respond to such a great quote like that.
No, I mean, I'm really honored that they thought about me and said something so kind. I think what I also, and I have a lot of respect for Chris, and was just did a webinar with him. I think we were with Serpy. Sometimes I just can't remember, but he was moderating the panel and it was great. And I was, I have a lot of respect for them. I think what I really appreciate about what he shared is, the feeling of being seen and having someone sort of understand like what you're trying to do and what you're doing and being able to play that back. So when I hear it, it resonates with that. So, yeah.
And again, for those listening, that 8 Black Hands podcast, something we listen to, at least me, weekly, and I know my team uses it as kind of their own professional development activity as well.
I haven't been on there yet. I haven't been on their show. Maybe
we got you on the Square Pizza before the 8 Black Hands.
Exactly.
Man, I don't want to throw any shade their way, but I'll take
I always
that.
feel like everything happens when it's supposed to. So
yeah,
I never worry about the cadence of things.
Well, I'd imagine they'd clear their schedule to get you on pretty quick, would be my guess. And I don't know if you remember, but I do want to say thanks because we've been familiar with you and your work for a number of years, but I reached out to you during COVID. You were kind enough to respond. We created a small fund, a COVID relief fund during COVID with 2 of our schools we were working with and their families to distribute funds to keep them going during COVID. And you were really kind with offering thoughts to help make sure we did it in a way that was equitable and also based upon success you've had in Oakland. So didn't want to start this podcast without expressing my own thanks and appreciation for you helping us a few years ago.
No, I remember that. Because we were sort of building it too and putting it together. So I think we just shared what we had and was like, anything that can help get you guys moving quicker and faster to serve community. Like, that's awesome. I definitely remember that.
Great. Well, that's great. We appreciate it. I know before we go deeper into the Oakland REACH and I think the graduation you mentioned tonight before we were recording, I want to talk about that. But just tell the people, kind of who you are. I know you're in Oakland. I think you have a background or at least experience working with KIP professionally. Curious about what you want to share with our audience before we go deeper into Oakland REACH.
I mean, I think the story that I would tell is like education has just been a part of my life and I think it's been destined to be my journey. And really just around lifting community. Like I said, my story is really deeply rooted in the fact that my family is from Jim Crow, South Mississippi. Grandma only got a 9th grade education, dropped out when she was 16 because she was pregnant with my mom. And then she had all her kids by the time she was 22. And they migrated from Mississippi to San Francisco, which is where our family sort of built its life and legacy. And that's where I was born and raised. And my mom was sort of like the school choice mom before it was like the thing. And she made sure I went to the best schools. I started off at I remember kindergarten, I started off at a public school near San Francisco State University that we actually had to catch a bus to. So that was definitely my mom attempting to like take me to a better school that she didn't end up liking. And then I ended up attending Catholic school from 1st to 8th grade. In the neighborhood, and that was great. And then I went to like a prestigious high school in San Francisco called Wilmerding High School. And it was through that journey that I got to see, especially when I got to the high school, because it was majority sort of white families, right? Like it was a small number of minority kids there. So I really got to see what it's like to have privilege at that level. The friends that I was making in my 9th grade year were living in Pacific Heights and had houses with elevators in them and things of that nature. And we had moved like around the corner. I started my first, I think 8 or 9 years in the housing projects of San Francisco, this area called Sunnydale. And then we moved like around the corner. And so it was definitely a culture shock and just the access and privilege and the access to the education. And like how you were expected to be a critical thinker. All those things like shaped me. And it also helped me understand like a lot of things had to kind of line up for those things to happen for me. And those things, they're just not, there wasn't a formula for that was going to be accessible to other folks as easily. So that really is the main sort of foundation for me. And I think like how it became, and so, yeah, like I taught students, I taught, back in the day, it was called English Language Development. I taught in Compton with TFA, really saw that I was like a sort of like behind the scenes person, saw a lot of the sort of like not great allocation of resources, and just did that. I was a basketball player, so I coached basketball.
Oh, cool.
And, I got my master's in ed tech. And so I ended up, so I have this long history. I ended up like moving to New York. And when we moved back, I became part of the founding team of KIPP Bridge in Oakland, and then ended up having a 14-year career with KIPP as a founder on the local level, a founder of KIPP Bay Area. So I was part of the first 5. And then I finished up my KIPP career at KIPP Foundation. And what I loved about working at KIPP, I'll pause there because I'm not sure if you had another question.
No, it's great. I mean, first question is, where did you play basketball and what position?
Well, I played it literally from like 4th grade all the way through high school. And I got some scouting and some recruitment, but then I decided like, I still wonder why I didn't want to play college ball, but I just think I got burnt out on it. But I'm left-handed, so I was sort of number 2 or number 3 shooting guard. And I could push that ball down the court and had a mean shot. So that was kind of how that worked. But it was great. I always reflect about like how much playing competitive sports since I was like little really shaped me, as a human being and leader now.
Yeah, I agree. I'm curious if you feel comfortable sharing more. I was able to play college football for all 4 years, and often don't know where I'd be without just that experience, and even playing football in college, but also before, and just all the life lessons I learned through sports, both in terms of just like showing up, practicing, but also working with and building relationships with people that may or not be different than me, both, culturally, racially, those sorts of things. Curious, like what sort of life lessons stood out to you through athletics?
I think it's very similar to what you shared. It's like showing up, right? It's like once you become part of a team, it's like second nature to show up for practice, right? And like everybody else, like you may have friends who are not athletes and they're like going to the store, or they're going to hang out at folks' house, but and because I ran track, I played basketball, I played volleyball. So like I was all year round, and I did have little spurts here, but just this thing about like, you make the commitment and then the motivation comes next. Like you're not waiting for the motivation. I think that was huge. Working as a team and strategy, like everybody's got a role to play, and you got to play the role, and you got to know your play. I think that was huge. Also, the discomfort, like pushing your body physically, pushing yourself mentally past what's comfortable, using sort of like mental agility around competitive, it's like folks trying to get in your head when you're like, it's a close game and there's like 4 minutes and
a little bit of shit talking. Yeah.
Yeah. Like which way? Yeah. Are you, how much shit you going to talk? How much you going to pay attention to the play? And then, and I think like one of the things I think about too is like with basketball, we had to do a lot of training during Christmas time, or we went and played, we did tournaments, right? So I just really think, or our school only had one basketball, one gym. So we had to switch times. We had to trade off times with the boys basketball team, right? And so if my practice wasn't until 5:30, we got into a room and we all did our homework, right? It was just like that discipline. And I made the varsity team my freshman year in high school. And so it definitely was. So it was learning how to like stay in my lane too, right? And learn and build from there, knowing how to sit on the bench, getting the opportunity to practice at that level and getting to play some games. But like I came from like playing for like 32 minutes of a 32-minute game to like freshman year, like lose like the dopamine high of being selected for varsity and then having to ride the bench a huge part and maybe playing 2 minutes of a game and just like learning how to learning that consistency. And then by the time I'm a junior, like, right, I'm running the show and that and that and the other. So just like patience and consistency, right? And showing up and like how you get compound interest over time, right? Of like now you're a leader on the team, your junior and senior years, but you rode that bench and you took that like minute when we were already 20 minutes up, right? 20 points up, right? You got in and you're like stumbling around because you don't have your body's not like used to being in the game. So that's the other thing I will say. It was like, you know how it was like when you were a freshman, it's like, yeah, if you're riding the bench, it's kind of, and you get in for the last minute, you do what you can, right? You can, and you just are like, hey, we're gonna keep building. So I can go on and on about like how transformative athletics was for, I think, who I am as a human being.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree. Just to connect that, I think we have Teach for America with a shared experience. I taught here at West Charlotte High School and coach football. But, and my identity was probably too wrapped up in sports growing up and in college. But then I think my biggest concern would be like watching film and, on defense, missing a tackle, messing up a coverage assignment, and then having to watch film with all my teammates around, like me as the captain, making a mistake and messing up, and maybe we lost, maybe we won, but just how mortifying that was. And then fast forward, 8 months later, I'm teaching, and I remember thinking like, there's no feedback here. Like there's no film, there's no coaching. I'm like trying to teach kids how to read, and people are like kind of beating around the bush and not really giving me good feedback. There's no like coaching cycles in my particular school. So it felt wild that I was getting so much feedback on my assignments, on my tackling, on that sort of stuff, playing football, which is a game, right? But not getting coaching and support in my school, like teach my babies how to read. And that dichotomy going from athletics to teaching in a public school in Charlotte just felt wildly off to me in terms of priorities.
I had not heard that before, but that sounds just about right.
But we'll save all that for another podcast. We'll get you back on. So let's fast forward to the Oakland REACH. Incredible work you guys are doing. I want to go deep into the graduation tonight that I know connects to one of your programs. And this kind of connects to what Chris Stewart offered up in his quote. But I love the language on the website. Specifically it says, the Oakland REACH is reaching to change, or REACH change happens at the intersection of organizing, advocacy, and programming. I love that because I think as we've been in the space, we see groups that do programming really well. We see groups that do organizing very well, but then there's always like the what next or the other end of the spectrum. I just love that you guys are doing both of those at a high level. So curious if you could talk about why that is and why covering both ends of that spectrum is so important to the work you guys do.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, when REACH started, we were sort of like the parent-led, parent-run advocacy group, and we were successful. We had a huge policy win in 2019, which was the opportunity ticket, and that was around giving kids and giving families and schools slated to close priority enrollment, right, in the district's enrollment process. And that was sort of one of a kind. It hadn't happened. And then we asked our families what was keeping them up at night about their kids' education. And our family surprisingly mostly came back with literacy, came back with reading. We're like, whoa, okay. And that really turned into a literacy for all campaign in 2019. That was one of a kind because it was really families, right, from the community leading the charge and saying, hey, this is a crisis. We know people are working on it, but our kids still can't read. And so that turned into like a 30-org coalition with the districts and CMOs and reading orgs. And, we were able to get the district to sign an MOU to move to the science of reading. So like we had two critical policy wins going into the pandemic. And then the pandemic hits and we did something that forever changed the DNA and has changed the DNA of REACH, which is after we did the relief fund, or while we were doing the relief fund, that was actually the first thing, right? We got money out within like 3 weeks to families. But we then started, once again, we're like an ask, listen, build, liberate type organization. So we always go to our families and we always ask. And like what we learned, we learned a lot about the lack of internet access and computers that folks had. But we were like, how do we use this as an opportunity to do something different? How do we turn this crisis into an opportunity? And then that's when we built the virtual hub. And that hub was literally like a school. We built this hub, and we built this to give our parents a sense of like thriving and not just surviving. It's like, what happens if you just push all of this BS out, right? The schools can't get to the kids anyway. We had more phone numbers than a lot of our schools did. It's like, what if we just took this opportunity to just build the thing that works for community? And we knew that this had to integrate socioeconomic and academics, but we were like not surprised, but kind of shocked that like all of a sudden our kids went at multiple reading levels virtually within like 5 weeks.
Wow.
And like, I would kind of say like the rest is history, because I would say for the next 18 months, what we were doing was like both running this external hub while partnering with the district to expand some of the best of it, right? Are we still on? Okay. You had kind of froze for a second. I didn't know.
Oh yeah, no, you're good. Yeah. No, yeah.
Okay. And so we just started to like become this more like programmatically integrated organization where like, and it's what I realized, and that's when our families were the happiest. Our families, in some cases, saw the first gains in academics during the pandemic through the hub. And nobody was screaming and nobody was yelling and nobody was fussing. You figure board meetings was virtual anyway. So a lot of the sort of forums that we use to advocate have pretty much disintegrated into like Zoom faces, right? And so we were able to really elevate that Zoom box in the highest level for families. We had like a family sustainability center that was virtual. There was just a lot there. And so for 18 months, we saved like years on our life by like serving our families in the most critical way without having to like fuss and yell at people, right? And the advocacy work that I realized that we were doing and have been doing that was most effective, nobody sees. 99% of our advocacy work is not visible to other folks, right? And that to me makes it more effective, because that means I can get on the call with the superintendent or her chief of staff or someone else, and we can shift things. The moment you've got to like bring parents out to a board meeting, or you've got to go public on like media, you've sort of lost, like there's sort of diminished returns on that. Okay. I can tell you from experience, you lose, because it's sort of like we are really big on like burdening the system and not the families. So it was through the pandemic that then the DNA of our organization became like, wait a minute, advocacy alone is not going to win it, and programming alone is not going to win it. What we need to though be doing is building solutions, because our systems haven't figured out how to build the best solutions to serve our kids. If they did, we wouldn't have to exist. But you need the advocacy superpower, because our systems don't work for a reason. So there is not going to be any flouncing through the poppy fields of like innovation. Okay. You're going to have to have some muscle to be able to make sure those things can scale. So that's what we have seen to be the secret sauce in the formula. Is like, we got to build, we have to build, right? And then like, we have to use advocacy as like the bodyguard to make sure that those solutions can move forth. And I find that if you use advocacy in the ways that we have, you end up gaining way more influence and impact, right? Like, you're not going to see me throw the superintendent under the bus. For what? What is the win on that? Like, right? I go out on you for 15. Yeah, it's like, she 90, at least 80%, and we don't like communicate and chat like that, but she 80% shows up for the things that we need her to show up for, because she knows that we're building the solutions that serve the kids that are not getting served, right? We're going to have issues where I'm not going to be happy with certain things, but I know how to go back to the table. I'm not going to go and talk to and we have media accessible to us, but I'm not going to go to media and say, oh, the district sucks, right? Like, because that's not helping kids, right? And so advocacy to me is like, a lot of it is behind the scenes, because it creates a lot less burden on the folks you're trying to serve. Because most families are trying to master convenience, Greg. They would rather drop their kids off, right? That's what privileged folks do. They drop their kids off and they know that their kids are advancing in reading and math. Our parents in our communities want to do the exact same thing. all of this like work we have them do to get access to quality has left our communities largely unchanged. In many ways, they're still in survival mode. And I would go as far as to say that we've got families, and this is why our work is expanding and going beyond education. And like even the model we use now brings in that socioeconomic component, right? So it's academic, but then parents, caregivers, so you got aunties or whatever, like now they have a job, right? Because we have parents who can like teach a master class on advocacy, but they can't pay their rent. So who's winning, right?
Yeah.
So, so we know that like, if we're not like addressing the life cycle, the full life cycle solutions, that our families will never win. We've kind of made education a burden for our families. Our families are like literally just trying to do the right thing. And they're asking to go this way. And we're like, oh, why don't you go over here? But our families want the same convenience as privileged families, but we give them more burden to get a lot less results. It's kind of maddening when you think about it. But I also think it's like, from an optics perspective, people just expect like Black and brown people to fight all the damn time and be upset, right? And I think that that's also problematic. Like if you watch the pandemic play out, you'll see that like privileged families came out, acted up around the pandemic closures, right? And then once the schools opened back up, they went back to doing what they were doing.
Yep.
And we may have criticism around that, but that's privilege. Privilege is I fight when I need to fight and I don't when I don't need to. We put our communities in perpetual fight mode. We like fighting. We're just like ready for a fight all the time. It's not sustainable and it's not effective. And like I said, our communities are largely unchanged as a result of that, more traumatized than ever. So that's what I've seen over the past 7 years. That's what we've experienced over the past 7 years.
I appreciate you sharing all that. I want to go deeper on like this approach to advocacy, right? No, it was great. You crushed it. Keep going. But going deeper on the advocacy piece, because I love what you said around really understanding what the true win is, right? Where rather it's kind of like throwing cocktails at each other back and forth in the media or exchanging a tweet. Like it might look good and feel good for a minute, but long-term solutions to support families and students, not going to happen if you piss off the superintendent or somebody else, right? So like, how do we kind of continue to engage and advocate in a way that's professional and or just advocate in a way that allows like relationship building to happen, knowing ideally parties like yourself and the district want to get across the same finish line?
Build the work. This is what I'm saying. Like our model, like first of all, focus on the problem. The problem is universal, which is our kids can't read and do math. So it's a problem that the superintendent needs to figure out because that's his or her job. And it's definitely his or her job. And they, the optics on education right now is a bit skewed, right? Because people are like, oh, you have tons of money. So now you should be able to solve for all the problems. But what folks don't understand is like we have an even deeper talent issue, right? So we may have more money and more open positions to provide recovery support, but we have less human beings to make that happen, right? So I could go fuss at you. But that's not going to change the vacancy issue, right?
Yeah.
But what we
next,
did
right?
was so what we did was build a solution that was able to go to community and say, guess what? You are right to want your child to be able to read. You are right to want your child to have to be good at math. Guess what? They ain't about to figure it out like that. And these are the real, like, pragmatic issues that exist. We can't fuss our way through it. We can't finger point our way through it. So when we built this liberator model, which is like upskilling parents and caregivers, you're solving multiple or you're addressing multiple issues, right? Because it's our communities that stay. Superintendents leave, principals leave, teachers leave, communities stay. When you build a model like this, you keep the assets in the communities no matter who goes. Kids are going to read or do math, whether the superintendent leaves or stays because of models like this. So it's not about how do you advocate so much as how do you build the solutions and advocate around how do you build great solutions that don't exist and they need to happen to serve community, and how do you advocate for those solutions? Advocacy shouldn't sit on the side, right? It should be integrated. And when you integrate it in the solutions, it is more powerful than ever. We've had 2 policy wins. And
Yep.
I feel
Yep.
like the advocacy that we use through the Liberator model is, to me, more sustainable and more impactful than just advocacy campaigns or policy campaigns by themselves, because policy is critical, but there's implementation of policy. And if you've pushed a policy and you don't have a place for that to land. So for example, if you get the state to pass a bill around something that's like, oh, we're going to give $50 million for like tutoring. Okay, well then where does that money land? So to me, it's like you got to have both an and. If you've advocated for $50 million, have a program for it to land in, because you want it to catch at the place where folks are. So like, that's how we build, because we realize, like, you know, our opportunity ticket campaign, Greg, like that campaign was a great symbolic win, but it's been completely ineffective in implementation. There have been all of these unexpected barriers on the, I don't want to use the word, well, there's been these unexpected external sort of incidences. Essentially, the opportunity ticket is dead because the board decided to rescind school closures, right? So they've decided to like rescind school closures. So the opportunity ticket only got prompted if a school closed, right? So it's a policy on the books that's around equity, but the school board, because of, you know, the city we live in and how they make decisions, decided to make that happen. So if we were only relying on that policy, we'd be screwed, right? So the fact that we're like, guess what? We've got this policy, but we're also building solutions to make sure kids can read and do math every day. And we've creating solutions for families, for communities to be assets in their communities and solve their own problems. It's basically telling the parents, you want your kid to do math, like be proficient in math. Can you or auntie or cousin or sister join this work? We're going to pay you. We're going to train you, because like it's going to take us from the ground making this happen. The data tells you, like, where's the influx of talent going to come from? We're not going to just have an influx of people who want to become, people are leaving the profession, not coming back, right? Or not sort of like, you know, running in. So, you know, I don't talk about advocacy as sort of a separate thing.
Yeah.
And we always
I know one of the
advocacy. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Right. No, sorry. I was going to say, I know one of the solutions you guys have already built that have been really successful, I think, is the graduation you're attending tonight. So I wonder if you can go deeper, give an overview about this graduation you're attending tonight and that program that you guys built as a solution.
Yeah. So after the hub, what we realized is that the hero of the hub was the paraprofessional, right? That paraprofessional role. And as anybody knows, the paraprofessionals are typically folks from our community. Those literacy tutors were the ones who like were hugely critical in getting kids to read. So as we were sort of evolving, right, out of that hub, it was sort of like, how do we take what we know and sort of build a model around it that really, and we're like, wow, if the paraprofessional role can actually get kids to read and do math, and we have a whole community of folks ready to step up and go above and beyond, we've just created some level of power, right? We've created a level of power, and that's what became the Liberator model. So the Liberator model, which is in literacy right now, and we're about to launch math this fall, it pretty much upskills, Greg, parents and caregivers to be tutors within the school district. They get a full salary and benefits. And the graduation I'm attending is this last cohort of folks that will make 90 tutors. They went through a 6-week training that was both like pedagogical, sort of pre-training, community building, leadership development. We also made sure, Greg, you've worked for the district before, you know how hard it is to get hired. So we made sure that like they had time to like fill out applications. We wanted to be seamless. So all of them have offers. All of them.
And the Oakland REACH is doing all this. You guys are facilitating the sessions. You're helping with that.
That's all of that with our. So I want to say 2 things about this.
Okay.
You can't do anything well without collective leadership. I want to say that again. Like, does there sometimes needs to be like the hard ass or the catalyst or the whatever, but everybody plays a role. And so I would say like our partnership with the district has been extremely critical in this happening, right? You got to have somebody on the inside. You got to have somebody on the inside that's going to help remove barriers. So that's been huge. And then, Greg, we're not the pedagogical folks, right? So we have a pedagogical partner called Fluent Seeds. And that's the person and so we're partnering with them, and they help on, like I said, the pedagogical side, while we do a lot of the other like culture, leadership development components. So when you put that all together, you get stuff like you reach your 90 tutors goal a year before the strategic plan deadline, right? So the first 2 years we're done, right? And now what we're doing is making sure we retain these folks. So we're about to like launch a wealth wage initiative to sort of close some of the gap around their salaries. They do not make a wage that's sustainable for them to stay in it. So it doesn't do good to have all these folks in there and then you can't retain them, right?
That's right. Yep.
So that's the graduation tonight. Super excited, and everybody's got a pathway. Everybody's got a job offer. They're either going back to their kids' school where we recruited them, because we recruited them in front of their schools, or they are going to another school that needs them.
Wow. It's incredible. I wish I could be in that room with you tonight, but no, it'll go well. So congrats on all that work and all the success.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Going to get you out of here on a few rapid fire questions, so we don't keep you all day, if that's cool.
Yeah, sounds good.
So I know you guys received some Mackenzie Scott support. Is that correct?
Yep, $3 million.
Congrats. So I would be remiss. A lot of our clients are going to want me to ask this, but can you give me Mackenzie's number so I can connect her to my?
Well, she just opened. They have a plan to open it up.
Yeah, I did see that. Yeah, I saw the website and everything else. But thank you for entertaining me. But congrats on that. It's incredible to know it.
Thanks.
Not that you needed the work to be honored and solidified, but the $3 million always helps, right?
That was a surprise, and I still can't believe it, to be honest with you.
I'm sure that was a good day. It had to be a good day.
Very good day.
Lakisha, tell us
about that too. Just so you know, it's like you don't like. We had someone reach out to us, and they interview you, and they say it's an anonymous donor, and they say that like you're not guaranteed. So they go through a whole due diligence, but you have like no idea who it is. And they're like, if this person's interested in funding you, you'll hear from them like in the next few months. And then we just by chance we were able to connect with another organization that had just gotten McKinsey money. And they were like, that process sounds like would happen to us. And they were like, so if you are going to get the money, you literally are going to get like a random email. And that email is they're only going to want to talk to the CEO. They're only going to talk to you for 15 minutes. And literally we had these interviews, Greg, in October. And I think it was like February the 6th or something, like 2:00 in the afternoon. I'm on email and I get the email. And I was just like, the room, like, I was like, oh, you know what? Right? I was like, no. This is not the email. This can't be the email.
Right.
Like,
I'm sure you read that a few times. Like, wait a minute, somebody come over here and read this with me to make sure I'm not making this up.
That. And I like forwarded to my chief development officer. I was like, I think that this is the email. I was like, okay, I'm going to respond. I'm going to get on the phone. And it was legit.
I mean, I'm so happy it worked that way, because I couldn't imagine having a colleague say that sounds like the Mackenzie Scott process, and then be waiting on that email and realize it wasn't the Mackenzie Scott process or something else. So I'm glad it worked out in the positive in that way, because that'd have been a hell of a bummer.
And we kind of forgot about it, honestly, Greg.
I'd imagine those 4 months, you're so busy, right? You're doing so much.
So busy. It's like we forgot about it, and it was like then it just popped up and was like, oh, bananas! This is awesome.
Oh, that's a good story. What's one thing our listening audience can do to support you and the work of the Oakland REACH?
I mean, there's multiple ways. I would say, like, follow us on social media. We always, we have a lot of individual donors. So we always love financial support to like grow and scale our work. But yeah, I would just say like following us, supporting us, even like tagging our work and sort of sharing with your network, I think is critical. I think that these next stages of where REACH is going, we're really thinking about how we help other folks scale, right? Like replicate this work in their cities. This literacy and math issue is not an Oakland only issue, right? So it's really in our hearts to support other folks to do similar work.
And what does Square Pizza remind you of?
Well, it's funny because I looked that up and saw that it was like Sicilian style pizza,
Yep.
right? I like looked at, well, I love pizza, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So you're a pro.
I was like, what is square pizza? So, I was like, what does that mean to me? So I was like, well, one, it means that I now understand that there is a type of pizza that's considered square pizza, which is Sicilian style pizza. And what I've also realized is that I don't think I've had Sicilian style pizza, right?
Okay.
So I've had a lot of different pizza. I've lived in New York, and you know how New York,
Yep.
New
I was
York
gonna say, yeah, that's right.
with the
Pizza
thin
pros
crust
up there.
and the grease all over the place, right?
Yep.
So I think that, but tell me, like, what does square pizza mean to you? You named a whole podcast after it.
I did, yeah. So the story, but the joke is that I really didn't want to name Shermco. I didn't think it was right to name it after my name, and it's not. I don't know. It's a fine name, right? But I tried really hard to name it something kind of like fun, and I was like writing long ass lists. I was like looking at Greek words and doing weird stuff. Like I could never find anything, so we just did Shermco. So this is like my opportunity to hopefully come up with a fun name. And my brother and sister-in-law, shout out to Kyle and Katie. We were talking about like, things about school, things about education, things about equity and diversity. And somebody asked the question, like, when did you have the most fun in school? And I was like, either football practice or lunch, and which was true because I was a pretty terrible student. And then so like we went deeper, and I was like, what was your favorite days in the cafeteria? And I was like, square pizza days, because like all my friends were around. I had a pretty diverse group of friends. I was like, we had a pretty diverse group of friends. We always liked square pizza. That's like when Beats came out from grinding, and we were always doing stuff on the cafeteria table. And so then we were like, what if we kind of built a school or built movements around how we felt while eating square pizza? So we kept square pizza, we kept the feeling, we kept the diversity, but everything else in the school changed to be as much fun as what square pizza, that moment we had with square pizza. And so that's what we were trying to do with naming the podcast Square Pizza.
I love that. And you know what? It reminds me, I'm going back to school lunch, and I'm a big eater. So I love food. Ours was circle. It was it was a personal circle pizza. Because y'all
didn't get square out there.
I'm like, yeah, we didn't get the square, but you bringing me back to like school lunch. Oh my God, we could do a whole podcast on like school lunch. Oh my God,
round two.
Round two. I love that. I love that.
Cool. Well, I appreciate it. I mean, thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for talking to me. We just appreciate you and enjoy graduation tonight.
Awesome. And so you're based in North Carolina?
Yes, ma'am. Charlotte, downtown Charlotte. I
love it. I have some friends. Yeah, I've got a little crew over down there. I got to go check it out. People love North Carolina.
Well, let's figure something out, and we'll definitely do that.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, let me let you go. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for checking out Square Pizza Pod, making a few selfish requests. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps spread the word about the podcast, and share this with a friend. We appreciate it. Thanks.